And now, finally, allow me to introduce our speakers. Ema is the principal of Ema Peter Photography. In the past 10 years, she has worked with some of the largest architectural, interior design, and engineering firms in North America. Ema's photography has helped many of these firms reach award-winning status. Her images have been published in Architectural Digest, Object International, Dwell, The New York Times, and in many more. Ema holds a master's degree in art and applied photography, as well as a PhD in photojournalism. Studio VDGA was founded in 2023 by principal architect Deepak Gugarii, who we have right here, and it is a nuanced architecture studio based in India. A versatile design style tied by the common thread of immaculate detailing and soul-enriching experiences is the studio's domain. They believe that perceptive design can invoke a feeling so intense that it can alter sensory experiences. Works of the studio have been widely published and recognized with over 70 national and international awards and accolades of high repute. Without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton over to Deepak, who will be kicking off today's talk. What do you have in store for us today?
Hi, Ema. Hi, Hannah. Hello to all from India. I would like to thank Architizer for providing me this idealistic platform to share with you all today my experience, inspiration, and approach behind shaping of our house, the project, the House of Courtyards. This talk today, which explores the collaboration of architect and photographer, I feel is so apt, since I believe in our entire lifespan, we all get to physically witness and experience a very few marvels of architecture across the world. Let's assume this number could be as few as 1%, and rest 99% of architecture we see through the photographer's lens. We either can't visit some geographically challenged sites, and more importantly, the private homes. I've always believed space in architecture can only be felt when all our six senses align together. Yet I also feel, and it's very interesting, our sense of vision dominates our other five senses. And I feel this must be extremely challenging for the photographers as to how skillfully they can touch the remaining spaces. Hence, a good photographer with impeccable vision and sensitivity is as important as a good architect. Thanks, Ema, for bringing out this true essence of our creation in front of the world. Now, I would like to briefly introduce as to who we are and the kind of works that we do. We are a design studio based out of India, where we have constantly tried to create spaces which transcend typology and mandates and follow only the instinct and the context. I've always been intrigued by the sensory experience and the context of any space. They almost tell you what design language is more justified. And following are a few examples where we have tried to approach each of our work in a unique way. For example, the story of Office in Cardboard in itself is very interesting. Project was to convert an old automobile space manufacturing unit into their new administrative head office. And the site was a mundane factory structure. This for us was neither inspiring nor a challenging context, till we came across an update in our general chit chat with our clients that the industry they were catering earlier was transforming rapidly from conventional diesel petrol engines to EVs. This update was a kind of a eureka moment for me, as I knew we now have a context. The word "go green" was the mantra, and in cardboard we found our primary material and inspiration. Cardboard as a biodegradable material for me was apt response that justified our approach and the theme of our design. The interior walls are built in layers of honeycomb board, and these free-flowing cardboard walls, while enveloping the space, not only created a strong visual narrative, but was a step towards creating a totally new interior system that was green. Now the second project, we were commissioned this project as of an Indian restaurant in Hanoi, Vietnam. The site was these twin bungalows of different styles, with a small foreground and all overlooking a vast and beautiful West Lake. These houses, which form part of a linear mixed-use neighborhood, had no strong architecture character other than the context of the lake itself. In such a scenario, it became evident that we need to give project some identity. Many questions came to my mind, like, can we build a new facade on the front boundary? But it was a no from the local authorities. Can we introduce some installation which is of a non-civil nature? And fortunately, this proposal was approved. But while doing so, we constantly reminded ourselves not to lose the views of the lake and the response to the lake. And so here came the idea of well, forming a facade that was solid yet porous, which looks different during the day and at the night. We created screens by molding golden metal wires into different patterns, which are reminiscent of Indian motifs. And this formed a 45 feet long and a 35 feet high facade. These screens resemble the embellishments of Indian sari and drapes the outdoor area of the restaurant without obstructing views of the lake. We got these filigrees woven from some talented local craftsmen in the villages of North India, and we are quite proud to ship them to Vietnam. The another project again was in Vietnam, and I have always appreciated architecture in Vietnam, which according to me is so appealing and relevant. So when we got this maiden project in Vietnam to design a factory cum administrative building in the city of Hanoi, we were quite thrilled, So we decided to follow the basics of design: neat, clean lines, no frills, and no nonsense architecture. So this whole building was wrapped in a non-assuming concrete box, and intentionally a wall of perforated metal screen was introduced in the front facade that created residual coats for the staff to spill out when needed. Knowing Vietnam is a flora rich due to its tropical climate, this screen, the breathing wall as we call it, is adorned with local plants, which not only adds up greenery to the working spaces, but also cuts off the unwanted glare and acts like a sound buffer to the street noises. Series of coats are introduced that bring in natural light for an office that works in a daytime, and that was important. Effort was to create an ambience which would give justice to the interior spaces in all seasons. Now this another house, this is a submerged linear house and was conceptualized as a piece of architecture that merges with the nature. The site cascaded to the backwaters of a dam and also enjoys the views of the distant mountains. As the name suggests, it was rather an easy design approach by simply opening the house to 180-degree view of the beautiful lake. But what remained more contextual was not to overpower the built form over the nature. The use of local and earthy material palette, cast in situ patterns of variety of plant leaf in the flooring, was our attempt to be as vernacular as possible. Now, talking about the deserts, now these are my inspirations behind shaping of the House of Courtyards. I developed affinity towards desert right at the beginning of my architecture journey. Vast covers of sand against the backdrop of deep blue skies seemed more than perfect to me. The structures in desert, I believe, are most faithful to their context. A strong monolithic presence, devoid of any confused identities. I think they are paramount to desert habitats. And nature's adversities have always enthralled me. And I feel every soul has an artist in them, It's just that our artistic side is more prominent in the adverse situation that life throws at us. And so I look with great respect at the desertscapes that were created by the local people before the arrival of architects. Be it the pueblos of New Mexico or the kasbahs of Morocco or the streets of Rajasthan, sensitivity towards climate is just inspiring. For example, let's look at the street planning of Jaisalmer, which is a city in deserts of Rajasthan. The streets here are narrow, intelligently aligned north-south, and laid out in such a manner that the structures on either sides keep the street shaded for the majority of the time. I've always wondered why Rajasthan has so many colors. Maybe it's everywhere. It's in their art, costumes, also on their houses. Maybe it was to bring in some frolic in the otherwise dry and barren deserts. I don't know if you all have seen or heard about the bungas in deserts of Kutch, India. Well, bungas are a fantastic example of a responsive design. These huts were designed to avoid direct heat penetration into its exterior surfaces and to tackle the seismic activity by the virtue of its circular geometry. These are not just shelters, but they are epitomes of local wisdom which withstands the region's harsh climate and at the same time reflects their vibrant art and culture of the inhabitants. Now, it was always my dream for the last 21 years to design and build in deserts. And when the opportunity came, it was in one of the most glittering cities of the world, Dubai, sorry, which though has a strong relevance to desert, but the city itself is brimming with such diverse architectural languages, right from the glass facades to overwhelming mazing. So rarely found vernacular structures. It witnesses all. It was quite confusing as to follow which context, the macro desert context or the micro Dubai city reference. So while finalizing the design language, we decided to pursue the macro desert architecture. And knowing our client's demand for a modern style villa, we engaged in a search of a more minimalistic desert architecture, and we discovered the pueblos of New Mexico. The buildings are made out of adobe, which is a mixture of earth and straw, and I was deeply inspired by its texture. Its earthen color merging beautifully with the surroundings and their overall minimalistic, honest approach. What they have achieved was what was just needed. On the other hand, the kasbahs of Morocco were nothing less inspiring, with their ascending, descending masses, small openings, tall turrets, and bold use of adobe. It's also so fantastic. Very sensitively designed at a time when probably architecture was derived only through sensory experience and the climatic requirements. So after taking ideas from these two dwellings, we had our approach pretty well defined. Now the challenge that remained was my client's passion and ambition to have a super luxurious villa. And for him, the budget really didn't matter. Keeping in mind we had to balance both purity of architecture and luxury, we consciously moved ahead with a lot of restraint. Now, talking about site, our site was butted between two already built villas, the architecture language of which I felt didn't justify the desert context, which I was, while I was taking my tour during my first visit through the streets of this gated community, it felt to me that The whole community is like a bouquet of beautiful flowers, all imported from across the globe. And something, didn't look right here. I had traveled with a purpose to Dubai, and I felt I should sow a seed of the land which can survive on its own and not cultivate the foreign seeds which may have to fight for its survival in the harsh and extreme climatic conditions of the deserts. I hope you all get what I mean to say here. Oh, and I forgot to mention our another challenge. In India, by virtue of working in a densely populated cities, which is generally the case with me, where the land prices are very high and we always got smaller plot sizes to design. One way it's very interesting, but we all love or prefer larger plot sizes to explore and play. And now that we got a bigger site of 30,000 square feet, we were extremely happy. But our happiness was short-lived as we got a requirement which mounted for almost 40,000 square feet of a house. Knowing this, when we stacked the requirement, it turned out to be a big cube. Further scooping out the masses, placing them in ascending and descending order to bring down the scale, and then again juxtaposition of the high walls, courtyards, and the water elements was all an outcome of summer and winter solar studies to create climatically conducive environment in this house. And this was the time our inspiration of Pueblos came in, guiding us how to bring in visually pleasing pauses or intervals amidst a large footprint. And this ultimately became our main planning locus. The idea of various masses rising unequally was to enable self-shading of the structures. This massing is outcome of a strategic and deliberate planning of function behind it. Fenestrations also kind of follow principles of climatology, with the south facade devoid of any large openings. And the main entry to the villa is between the two parallel high walls, which symbolizes grandeur to me. They also ensure shading of the entrance area alongside the adjacent masses. The journey with curiosity of what lies beyond, I can say, begins here. We intentionally designed some interesting transitory spaces, making journey through the house very interesting. You enter from a small volume and exit into a double height spaces, and from double height spaces into courtyards, witnessing the olives and the shallow water body, and further again enter into a small volume. This kind of a transition I love in architecture. Now this cover photo of Architizers 2025 book for me captures the true essence of our creation in many ways. Be it the single sculptural olive tree that seems to induce a sanctity in the space, or the turrets with a purpose, or the lattice screens in the courtyards, or the walk between the sacred water bodies, it all sums up so well. We have tried to bring in life in almost all the enclosed spaces. For example, this stairwell, as you can see, is basked with diffuse natural light coming through the narrow skylight in the roof. I believe one does not see the light, but the light reflected by the object. This sounds so appropriate when I say this, when one sees the light reflecting the beautiful texture of a weathered stone cladding. Now, evolution of high turrets that you see in the rear massing too has a story. Our clients desired to have the morning light coming into their main bedrooms. It was rather a difficult task as the bedrooms were placed extreme west side, say almost 200 feet away from the main facade, and the massing on the east side was blocking the light. So we decided and introduced courtyards outside each bedroom, which we call as turret courts. And by virtue of these, we brought the morning light into the bedrooms. Basement for me is another interesting space in this house. We place the pool in the basement of the house, and hammam as we call it. It is a summer paradise to its surrounding lounge and spa areas. The placement of the pool in the basement not only ensured privacy but also made the pool practical to use in hot Dubai summers. This pool for me is a hidden treasure of this villa. This outdoor kitchen, chula ghar as we call it, is inspired from a traditional open kitchens in India, and these are made out of adobe and used to cook in a traditional way. Knowing the client and the pride that he carries with the Indian tradition and rich cultural heritage, I found the means to take him back to his roots through these small architectural and interior elements. We stepped into our maiden venture into designing these stone furniture for this house, especially for this house. These furniture pieces are my manifestation of culture in architecture, further transformed into pieces of art, and are all inspired from these magnificent stepwells of India. We have hundreds of them in India. Lastly, I believed that architecture should not be overwhelming, but it should be muted and soothing, like a balm to our souls. And we are constantly thriving to create such poised, sensitive spaces that command respect and attention. This mantra has driven me in creating truly enriching works, which I hope must have inspired many today. And Hannah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Deepak. This is absolutely stunning. The textures that Studio VDGA is using across all of their work are just absolutely gorgeous, but then also to get to know this project in greater detail. I've spent a lot of time looking at it as I edit our book. And I feel like each time I'm inspired to go back to the plan to look even closer, because there's so many spaces that are so distinct tucked throughout, and Emma's photographs really help to illustrate that. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Emma. Deepak, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Like Deepak, amazing, amazing. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you, Hannah and the Architizer team, for starting again a really interesting topic about collaboration. And I saw so many people joining from around the world. It's actually wonderful to see from all sides of the world people here. I have to tell you, from the moment when Deepak and Hannah and myself started talking about the collaboration between the photographer and the architect, I started talking to most of the architects I work with, and there are a lot of people, on this topic, which led to some really interesting, really passionate conversation. Maybe we should do a dialogue one day with all of this. And I learned a lot. I learned recently that the moment you forget about your own ego and about your own sense of rightfulness, you really can explore the world in a different way, through the eyes of someone else, like we did with Deepak. And for many years, I feel my goal has always been to capture the light, as you can see in this image, the way I see it. I thought that my way is always right, as it's been very linear for me. It's always been about capturing that photojournalistic Cartier-Bresson moment in architecture. That's it. And this is the time I press the shutter. I have to feel it. I always do. Like here, I chased this lady in red for a bit, but I pressed it. And I know what I want to capture. But I also, there is a business side of my brain as well. You know, this image, it was on the last Architizer cover. I think about what is the story, which publications we're going to target, what is the target market for the architect, and which one will do a good cover. But the key thing is to create impactful images. And people at the moment, it is so important to somehow stop them in their track. And this is what we need at the moment in this visually changing environment, where we are all bored of constant flow of images. We're almost desensitized. I have to say, I read research on what people are interested in seeing, and I've mentioned on all platforms and this one, people want Zen. They want, and this is what Deepak conveys in a lot of his work, they want calmness, they want Zen. And now, this is what I want psychologically. I almost want in my day a little moment of visual peace. I'm sure all of you do as well. Also, what I learned with the collaboration with the architects is I can actually allow myself to see through other people's eyes. I can see the world once again. I speak a lot about the innocence of the view. I can see the world differently when I explore those close relationships. And this is a completely new way of existing, a better way of existing, at least for me, because it's changed me. Because I used to get very frustrated when people would kind of move my camera or direct me or do anything like this. I used to get very upset. But now I started welcoming it, which is a big change for me. Maybe I'm maturing, I'm getting older. Now I know the only way to do great photography is you stay true to yourself, to your beliefs, but you also stay curious and explore the world of others. And I'm surrounded by incredible creatives. So it's so enriching, because as humans, we manage to override those relationships. Like, I'm sure all of you are guilty for this. Do we know people around us? We can only see work through our own eyes often, and this is the biggest problem. We see only through our experiences. But imagine how much richer we would be if every day we saw the world through the eyes of someone else, kind of their eyes and their experiences. But we can, if we allow it to. And Deepak and I did this. We as creatives can create the perfect symbiosis of lights and lines of photography and architecture, really by learning, by listening, by feeling. So my biggest goal, I've been quite annoying on the shoots recently. I've been asking, since we started this topic, I'm asking absolutely everybody all sorts of questions, because do you really know the people you work with? So what makes them light up? Which book is their biggest inspiration? Which building, which quote? And I realized I knew no one. I knew myself. The most beautiful things are achieved when we remember we're not alone. And we maybe can see the full spectrum when we learn to see the invisible for our eyes, but the visible for the eyes of others. And do you know, I have always been that crazy cloud chaser. Everybody who follows me on Instagram knows that. And almost daily, someone from around the world, from the architecture group, will send me a message and say, I saw a cloud, I thought of you. And maybe I've given something to the architecture world with images. But in those moments, I think I have made someone feel my world, see the world through my world. And it's such a fantastic sensation. What if each one of us does this? Which Deepak and Hannah, and I know everybody's little thing that actually makes them feel, we'll see the world in a completely different way. And I think a lot about great love stories and collaborations. Very often, how did Fitzgerald worked around Gertrude Stein, or his close relationship with Hemingway, or how did Rodin influence Camille Claudel, or the opposite, or how did Messina, the muse of Fellini, change the way he saw the world? We all have triggers, but we see just little bits of the world. And the most beautiful moment is when you know someone so deeply you can express them. And this is for all the architects that are here. I know you're busy. I know how busy you are, but you build the building for 2 to 5 years, and we shoot for 1 to 2 days. Your work that is being built for such a long time is captured in a day or two. And sometimes architects don't come with us. And I have to tell you, nothing compares to watching the light change on that facade, as Deepak and now know with the House of Courtyards. and seeing whether your imagination and reality actually matched. Somehow allow your photographer to speak, but be there to observe and teach them your visual language. This is one of the biggest things I learned with collaborations. And a good friend of mine and an architect who I worked with for a while told me something that really touched me. And it was so impactful. He said, "The world sees my work through your eyes." And I want to repeat this, as it has a huge impact on me. The world sees the architect's world through the eyes of the photographer. Most buildings are experienced around the world via photography. So I cannot stress enough how important the collaboration and the collaborative process, understanding the passion of people like Deepak sent me millions of photos of the House of Courtyards, for me to understand his passion and how we wanted to work together. And somehow this is all lost nowadays. Do you know how often I'm sent with a PDF by marketing team and I never get to meet the person who has put their life and soul for years in the project? But why? And I want to go back now. The collaboration I really want to talk about is Le Corbusier and his photographer, Lucien Hervé. In 1949, the self-taught photographer went and photographed. He did 650 photographs in Marseille in a housing complex by Corbusier, and he sent it to him. And Corbusier said that after 40 years of looking for someone to express his architecture, he had finally found him. And the two men worked together for I think about 16 years until Corbusier died, and those were some of Corbusier's most fruitful years. He died in 1965, and I mean, look at this image. I'm sorry, I didn't find the bigger resolution. We even sent an image to sent the email to request it, and I know the verticals are not straight, but it is such an incredible play of shadow and light, understanding the roof with the shadow of the little girl in the concrete, the freedom of the run. You feel the space somehow, the shapes. This for me is the decisive moment, and architecture, this is the moment they meet. When you're not bound by rules and you can just capture how architecture is used, how it exists. And this image impacted me from the very beginning of my career. And I cannot tell you how far as possible we are from this now. But what I love as well is because life moved so much slower in those days, they didn't look at the iPad and the computer, they had to wait. And Hervé did contact sheets and then chose the best images and then put them in albums. And then the two of them sat down and reviewed them. So it was not only their collaboration that for me is extremely interesting, but also their editorial choices. I mean, can you imagine two huge names getting together to select an image? How did they select this image and why this image? And it really, really reminded me the times I went through Cartier-Bresson's contact sheets to see how he found the decisive moment. And now I feel like with age, I understand that it's quite simple. It is choosing the moment in time that visually spoke to the architect and the photographer. And for me, this was a huge lesson. And because Hervé created cinematic visual experiences that unfolded over time. And in so many ways, this is what I want to do. And this is when I work with Deepak or anyone else, I want to create my own visual world in the world of the architect. And I have to tell you, the last time I did contact sheets was 20 years ago with an architect. So that shows you we're not doing as well. One of the most well Canadian architects, John Patka, works with his photographer, Jimmy Doe, for over 30 years. They sit and watch the light together. And he told me sometimes they sit for hours to catch just one image. I can almost imagine them. And there's something really special in collaborations like this. I watch Fernando Guerra and Alvaro Siza working together, and I'm like, wow, this is what I would like to do in my life, is actually grow old with people, understand their world so well that we don't need to talk. We just need to, with one movement, we can achieve symbiosis somehow, and at the same time still find things to challenge each other. Because when you respect people a lot, you end up challenging them more because you want to make sure that they respect the next piece of work in the next. And I feel some of my strongest collaborations actually happens, to be honest, happens with people that I don't see eye to eye. Like I actually fight with in the beginning, and Deepak and I are quite strong characters. We know how it goes. But if people can challenge you, if people can give you knowledge that you did not have, that's the important part. And I want to give you examples. This is projects by Lecky Studio, and their principal, Michael Lecky, made me realize that I can photograph no matter how pouring rain it is. Prior to his work, everyone I worked in Canada wanted the blue sky, wanted the perfect blue sky. They wanted the sunny day. And that's hardly achievable with 6 months of rain in Vancouver. We're in a rainforest, so I don't know what the expectation is. And in the beginning, I was very opposed. I was like, there is no way I'm gonna hold an umbrella. How am I gonna move the camera and go out in an atmospheric river? Imagine an atmospheric river that's pouring rain. But the moment when you're driving towards a shoot and you're wondering, what am I doing, is also a very pivotal moment for you, because your fears come out and you're worried, can you change your ways? It is so much better to stay in your little comfortable zone, and that's about it. But you know, when you're pushed like this to get out of your comfort zone, this is the point you need to pivot. And this is the point you're growing. And this is where collaboration is so, so incredible. And you realize you don't even use 1% of your creative potential. This is what I've realized. And recently I was sitting on the terrace of this amazing project. You can see it right in the middle on the terrace with Clinton Cunnington from Measured Architecture, one of my very close friends, who we speak about poetry and architecture. And I asked him after a shoot, what is the importance of the collaboration between the photographer and the architect? And he always says something beautiful. And he said, if an architect can surrender to the photographer and allow her, and I want to say allow her, just the point, to find the space through the lens, then an architect can learn how the building speaks without their voice present. I want to make a pause because this is so beautiful. The synergy can lead to critical lessons for future projects, as the intent is not always the user's outcome. I've never thought about architecture in this way. The favorite book he gave me is Judith Turner. He gives me books and music, and Judith Turner, Photographing 5 Architects. If you have not seen it, I highly advise you buy it or see it. She expressed the world of architecture in such an artistic way. When you look at her photographs, which are, I mean, you can see mainly details of shadow and light. I always think, what really is the reality of architecture, or what kind of dialogue she had, like her, the observer, and the subject, the architecture. She created a visual language that speaks in such a different way. This is art for me. And I've always tried to do, to catch reality in a photojournalistic way. It comes from the photojournalistic background. But there is a place for both. Nowadays, we catch those big images. We try to capture the full project, but we can catch both. But of course, due to deadlines, we cannot. And here's where the romantic streak goes away. Like, I can tell you, probably in time of Judith Turner and Helena Binet, two of the most amazing women in architectural photography, I'm sure the deadlines were few weeks, and we often are asked to photograph and deliver on the next day. And this is where I want to speak to the architecture group. Let us express, because we can achieve those type of images. And with Deepak, we did. And so when he invited me to do the House of Courtyards, I thought this would be such an interesting collaboration. He was coming from India. He was used to a specific type of light. And he was sending me images, I mentioned, from his phone that I was like, why am I going? Like, his images were so strong. So a little bit of intimidation there. And I'm a Bulgarian Canadian that lives in Vancouver and has to deal with overcast skies, and as you saw earlier, on a regular basis. And here we are in Dubai in May, and like in May, when the light moves like this, especially, this is a screen cap on my phone because I've never seen the light move like this. You see, it's super low, and then suddenly you have this crazy harsh light for like a long period of time that you have to deal with. I've never even crossed my mind to shoot midday. Midday is not a good time, but we were in the deserts. And Deepak spoke about his love of the deserts in his presentation. And funny enough, I have the same passion for desert. When I was growing up, there was one poster on my wall, and it was a man always wanted to visit. It was a man from above at sunset in the dunes, where you can see every grain of sand and the beauty of that low light. And at the same time, Deepak loved the stronger light that happens more midday, the way it was shaping the building. And I could see how we can do some really beautiful early morning, late afternoon shots. And this is a very good example of the two. You know, it works. No matter what, it works. It's a very different aesthetic. He mentioned earlier, but I love the fact that I probably changed the way he saw the world, and he changed mine. And he could see the building, almost how it blends, what he was talking about, the aesthetic, almost how it blends with the desert in the harsher light. Something I saw later, I didn't even see it when I was shooting. And he said he didn't specifically like the dusk shots in the beginning, but the more and more he started looking at them, they became his favorite. So you see, this is how we learn each other's visual language. Two people from different countries, from different culture, different light. I have to say I prefer my way of shooting though, because like it's 50 degrees midday. So if we can stay in midday, it would be much appreciated. But I wanted to show you this, and this image we talk about, but I want to show you the same image 2 different times of the day. I don't know whether you can feel it, but I can totally like have a different sensation out of it. One is like middle of the day, and I feel like the moment I actually see the key shots, I know the key shots now. I know which shot is going to become kind of very popular because of the feeling that it evokes. And that's why sometimes I photograph the same location in many types of the day, because I think it's important. And because this is the way architecture speaks. Architecture speaks with light. And those are the moments also you have to, Deepak was probably wondering, why am I going back to the same location every 20 minutes almost, when we have this enormous amount of beautiful angles that we need to photograph. But again, as an advice, if your photographer wants to do something a little bit different and is seeing the potential, I think it's very important not only to capture those really specific angles and details that the architect wants to catch, but you want to showcase the romantic side of it as well. Like for me, it was the story, the olive tree in the courtyard, the book. There is a book right in front of the tree, and the little girl. I put the little girl, and people love stories. When they see your like home or your architecture, they want to be there. They want to transport themselves, and this is kind of the most important thing we need to convey. So that's why I fight a little bit until I get those images, because I think it's really important to show all of those clean lines and all of those key elements, but also you need to learn to speak to the public, to speak to, and this is how I think those images for covers happen, and kind of the strongest images happen. And here we have the same example of kind of, look at it. You have daytime and dusk, both of them work fairly well. And when an image works, it works. No matter who you are, no matter what's your aesthetic, everybody comes together. And I remember the reaction of the team when I did this image. And Hannah, you mentioned this image was kind of strong for you as well. It becomes no longer an image of a dining room. It becomes, you can feel that emotion, the light. And there were 7, 8 people behind me looking at the iPad. And every time I could see their reaction when the image came on the showed up. And this reminded me when I was a kid with my dad in the dark room, my first reactions when I would see an image, the paper in the development tray and the image comes up, it was magic. And I always thought, this is what I want to convey in every shot that I do. I want to make people feel this every time they see my images, like to feel that sense of magic. And I want the architect to look at an image and to say, I never saw that angle, or I feel something, I see something different in the work. And Deepak talked about this, but I want to tell you the real story. So he knew so well the light that comes through in this house, that which I couldn't for 3 days, that no matter where I was, he told me, Emma, we have to catch that light in the staircase. So I was somewhere in the house and he would run back and forth. He would run back and forth to actually check. And this is the engagement of the photography process between an architect and a photographer. And for me, this is in so many levels the engagement that we need to capture the best images. I know it's hard to spend the time doing it. Deepak spent 3 days with me, but 2 sets of eyes, 2 passionate people that want to get the soul of a project, like in series of images. I mean, you guys have seen all of those images, because this type of collaboration can bring so much beauty. Like Corbusier did, being with Hervé on the shoots, traveling with him. And I'm going back to this image again, all of those moments that you can see here were together, experienced together. And if there's anything that I want you to take out of this talk, is we're all creatives, we all have our own visions, but we're happier as artists when we collaborate. And the true freedom of expression comes from curiosity of exploring your own world, the fascinating world of our imagination, but also other people's imagination. So my advice is just keep exploring, because our life could be so much richer. Thank you. Hopefully that talks about collaboration to everyone.
Thank you so much, Emma, so much. I've been taking so many notes. I think you speak so poetically, and I think your talk kind of expands beyond just architectural photography and collaboration, but also just to the way we live our lives and connect with colleagues in general, that sense of curiosity. I'm going to be asking people for their favorite quotes.
Well, but no, we don't know people. And like all of this Deepak's like poetic way of seeing everything. I mean, like even in our conversations now, when I'm listening to his talk, and I listened to one of my closest friends, Andrea McLean, talk yesterday, I'm realizing that I still don't know them, and I can still learn so much.
We never fully know people, and if we keep going deeper, I feel like it's just deeper connection and better collaboration in general. Thank you so much. And
of course.
Yeah, it's for me in the images, you can really see there's this magic and this animation, and I think in general, the more perspectives you have, the richer anything is in life. So thank you so much. And yeah, I said this to Emma privately and to Deepak privately, but that one image earlier when I first saw it.
With the little girl, yes.
It actually took my breath away. I was stunned. I was scrolling and I was just stunned. So I think that that's the mark of an excellent photographic collaboration for architecture. Anyways, I don't want to keep rambling because we have many questions. In the questions, before we get there, I'm just going to remind everyone that if you're interested in potentially participating in Architizer's A+ Awards, we'd love to hear from you. Just right below the chat where you've been chatting, there's a tab called Polls. If you go to that Polls tab, you can respond and let us know, and we'll add you to our mailing list so that you can learn more and keep tabs on our launch, which is coming in early October. Also, don't forget to save your special discount code for this year's edition of our beloved Architizer book with Emma and Deepak's image on the cover. We'll share the discount code with you after this talk as well in an email. So anyways, for the questions, we don't have any that are as much focused on collaboration. I'm going to maybe choose ones for each of you. So the first one was asked, and it's actually our most popular question for Deepak. And it's by Joseph. Joseph asks, if cost wasn't a factor, what were some of the most important requirements and aspects for this customer when you were trying to choose the design?
Yeah, that's what I mentioned in my presentation, that in early days we used to kind of really struggle with clients. We wanted good budgets, and today, after the pandemic, I have seen that people have been spending money like hell, and sometimes I feel when especially you are doing a luxurious house, and when budget is not a constraint, it somewhere, I always keep it in my subconscious mind that that somewhere the money should not be deterrent to my creativity somewhere, and budget in this project was not an issue. At the same time, we have been given a total free hand, so that we all know that free hand comes with a lot of responsibility, and we had to keep always this in mind, that while except for our main programmatic requirements, like client had given us a complete free hand, and while we are spending, so we carefully saw to it that the architecture, soul of architecture, is not really being touched by that, overpowered by the budget of the client. I mean, that's it. I mean, yeah. I hope I have answered the question. You want me to again answer? If yeah.
Thank you. I'm kind of curious before I jump, because Emma, we have some more kind of specific technical professional questions for you. I kind of wanted to hear a bit, maybe from both of you, just how, when you first began this collaboration, when Deepak first reached out to Emma to photograph this building, kind of what were your first steps in planning the shoot, Emma, before you flew to Dubai? Were there kind of things that you did, research you did? And Deepak, like the images that you were sending, or when you sought out Emma, something specific you were looking for that you communicated?
Okay, I think my prep was, I mean, I knew Deepak and I had a lot of conversations, and it was, to be honest, it was visible. I remember him telling me something that it caught his eye was that family relationship between my dad and I, and like, because I expressed quite often, yes. He was a cinematographer, and I still, honestly, every day when I go to a shoot, I express him in so many ways still. And I remember like thinking, wow, this is the first time an architect calls me and talks about something that actually is so important for me. It doesn't start with, oh, you're a great photographer and I would like to hire you, or can you send me a quote? It started with, what triggered me was your love and your following the footsteps of your dad. So this is my first memory, and like, which kind of immediately led me to wanting to work with him.
And Hannah,
and there were tons of photos, definitely. And he's good. He's really good at photographing.
And I actually knew that we couldn't wait for the place to be, the shoot to be delayed. I know that in October or December, it could have been a fantastic time of the year to, especially November, December. But we did this all solar studies and all, and it was in one way she clicked the images in an extreme summer when the sun was overhead. And I was really wondering about burning of the surfaces, or, and she managed it so well. I mean, if we had 2 more days, maybe probably we could have done more, but there's no end to it. So I knew Ema already that I'm posing a lot of challenge to her, and because she works in a place where it rains or it's overcast, and it's here in a different world where it's extreme heat. And I remember when we did a videography, and a videographer's cameras completely went off because of extreme heat when they were shooting in a courtyard. And in one way, we also got to show from her images that these images are shot in May, and the whole idea of our design of high walls and the shading the space, it is seen in the images, and that is what it really paid off. I mean, though it was a challenge for Ema, it was wonderful for us. It was quite challenging.
Yeah, 50 degrees is not as I said, but I'm very well prepped. I just came back from LA where there was a heat wave and I was the only person that would stand outside from everyone. So you definitely have prepped me for many more hot shoots.
Yes.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine you being from somewhere with more opposing weather, Vancouver to Dubai.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately, this is all we have time for. Thank you so much to everyone who shared questions. As I mentioned, there's the poll up right now. Anyone last minute people who want to respond to our poll, please do. I also just want to remind everyone that we have another Future Fest talk coming up later today at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So in 2 hours, wherever you are in the world. And it's going to be with Klaas Houfman, who's a senior associate and architect at MVRDV. And he's going to be considering the firm's joyful design ethos and how that innovates in urban futures. So I hope to see you all there. And thank you again, Deepak, and thank you, Ema, so much. And thank you to everyone who attended. We look forward to seeing you all at our other talks over the coming days.
Thank you so much, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Hannah.